feels like decades ago. But it was just 3 years ago where we came in with some hope and optimism, only to be shaped by once in a lifetime pandemic that has challenged us in every way, shape, or form, not just professionally, but personally. And it's certainly shaped not only our consciousness about who we are as a state and a nation, but also, I think, open up and stretch the minds of what we could have never imagined we could be. And that is, I think, testament to the resilience, not only of all of you, your industry, but also this state, and for that matter, this nation. And so I come to you 3 years later with tremendous optimism, perhaps more importantly, a lot of pride. There's a lot that has been said about our state, your state. There's a lot that has been spread, lies about your state and our nation. And that's challenging. I come home every night, and I mean this, I turn on Tucker. Sit there waiting for the handoff to Laura. And then I get to close my night out with Sean. You know, during commercial breaks, I'll check in with Newsmax. And, you know, I have my nightly summary sent to my staff by something called One American News, just so I can understand how well we're doing here in California and appreciate how appreciated we are as a state. It's an amazing thing to see that reflected back every single night. So I'm wondering why the hell you're all here. I mean it. You know, I just saw DeSantis just took another shot 10 minutes ago on Twitter, calling us a cesspool. I can't even remember words he used. It's an amazing thing. Now, I'm not naive about all this. I've grown up in California. I remember Time Magazine did an entire special edition, 1994, the California Crack-Up edition. It was like back when there was advertisers. It was hundreds of pages of how California has done. It's over. The mass exodus from Silicon Valley, how we were browning as a state. You should go back and read it. It's a jaw-dropping display of the kind, you know, of cadence almost of negativity that comes at California, seemingly almost on not an annual basis, though recently it feels that way, but certainly decade by decade. And I think in many ways we've been in that phase over the last number of years, even pre-pandemic, in a way that I haven't experienced in my lifetime. And I think there's a number of reasons for it, but it's interesting when you move past all of that and all the punditry and you look at some of the stubborn facts that get in the way of that narrative. And I say this with respect because I think facts do matter. And it's an interesting point to emphasize because you live in a factual world. You guys, 99% of you have never done better in your damn lives. The economy for you in many respects has been rather extraordinary. The market's been rather extraordinary. You're seeing activity that you never imagined seeing in your lives. It seems a lot more healthy. Now, it's not as even as it was. But in many respects, it's a pretty hot damn market. And the facts do bear that out. You know, pre-pandemic, California's GDP rate grew at a 21% clip over a 5-year period. That wasn't only nation-beating. There was no other Western democracy that outperformed the economy of the state of California for the 5 years prior to the pandemic, including the United States of America, Germany, Japan. It's a fact. It's interesting, and I say this with love and respect in my heart. 21% GDP growth over a 5-year period prior to the pandemic. Texas, just 12%. Interesting. Now you say, well, that was great. That was before the pandemic, and then you guys all screwed up the economy in the last 2 years. Well, hold on. Is that true? I know what they're saying, but is that true? It's an interesting fact. There was a detailed analysis of California's economy over the last 2 years. In fact, we just came out with last year's GDP numbers I don't know if you saw last year's US GDP. Pretty impressive. Last year, grew at 5.7% in the United States. What you may not have seen in 2021 is that California's economy grew faster than any other economy in the United States, save two. Impressively, two small states in the US, led by Tennessee, marginally outperformed the state of California, but our GDP rate grew at 7.8% in 2021, the third fastest in the United States. Now, I find that reasonably impressive because that's not what I'm hearing every night on Hannity, Tucker, and England. In fact, quite the contrary. I'm hearing about the California's economic crack-up. How can it be that state, Texas, actually did worse than the national average last year? And California crushed every other state economy except two small economies in this nation. How can it be that even if you look at 2020, because I know what you're thinking, well, that's 2021, look what you did in 2020. Well, hold on. In 2020, yes, the economy in the state of California contracted, but a substantially lower rate than the United States, a lower rate than Florida, and a significantly lower rate than the state of Texas. On the health and wealth debate, there are no peers. California, your state, outperformed. Not only economically, but let's look at the data on the number of lives lost, because I remember living in a world where people cared about people's lives. Our number one priority, governors of every political stripe said, is the health and safety of our people. If that's the case, then why did California outperform the state of Florida with 51% less deaths per capita over the course of this pandemic and still outperform the state economically? That's something you should be proud of. On the Health and Wealth Index, this state is outperforming those states that are getting all the same attention. I say this, yes, defensively. He came in hot this morning. A bit defensive, says critics. But you know why? Because I have pride in this state. I love this state. And I think the best days are ahead of us. I'm sick and tired of, I guess it may be what it feels like to be a, New York Yankee fan or something. Everyone loves to hate the Yankees. So I guess maybe it feels that way sometimes in California. We dominated again in venture capital, more than the next three states combined last year. More IPOs out of this state than any other state in the nation. Number one in two-way trade again. Number one in factory jobs. Let me repeat that. Number one in manufacturing. Number one in factory jobs. Number one in household income growth. That's the state of California of the last couple of years. Time to put our heads up. We're about to announce the biggest surplus in United States history yet again this May, after last year's biggest surplus in U.S. history. We gave back $12 billion of tax rebates last year. I don't know why that wasn't celebrated. The largest tax rebate in U.S. history last year. We created a brand new grade, TK for all, this year. We're extending the school days to 9 hours from 6 hours by doing what Arnold Schwarzenegger was promoting for decades, and that was universal after school and summer school. We did it last year, $5 billion to begin to implement it and reimagine the school year. That's real school reform. You want parental choice? It's the ability to send your kids, 4-year-olds, to get high quality education. That's real choice. This is a state that recognizes that we need to do more for the health and safety of our citizens. That's why this state put $4 billion up. You didn't read this anywhere. We care about our children. 0 to 26, we put $4 billion up for universal screening and comprehensive services for every child in this state. The legislature approved that last year, and we're implementing it this year to deal with adolescent mental health, not just physical health. We put up unprecedented investments, $2 billion to create new child savings accounts 3.5 million of our kids are going to enter into kindergarten getting $500 to $1,500 starter accounts. Their parents don't have access to checking and savings, but every child that enters into our public education system will. And that's not only create a college-going culture, that's also about financial literacy. That's also about addressing wealth gaps. No other state in U.S. history has ever done that. I think that's something to be proud of, and something a lot of people have missed in this state. But I know what you're thinking. Why the hell is he wasting our time on all that? You're thinking, has this guy ever been to LA, walking the streets of Fresno or Bakersfield, walked down the street and seen what the hell's happened to his state? I get it. The original sin is the thing that connects the dot to all of us, and that's affordability. I get it. And that just didn't happen overnight. That wasn't created during the pandemic. That's been an original sin going back decades. We're as dumb as we want to be as a state as it relates to addressing the issue of affordability, because it seems like no one ever got through 7th grade Econ 101. Supply and demand. There is more demand than there is supply. We need to build more housing. It's not even that complicated. The challenge is how the hell do we do it? How do we get out of our own way? And that's what we've been working on. And I want you to know, I'm really proud of the legislature the last few years. I haven't gotten the credit they deserve. I've had the privilege of working with this legislature just in the last few years to sign 31 housing bills, to work with the realtors. John, I'm so proud of the realtors that have been the muscle behind some of these tough bills. I've signed 17 CEQA bills. 17. Now I know I know we have more work to do on CEQA, but the idea that we've made impact on 17 CEQA bills, the idea that we created a new housing accountability unit, first time the state's ever had a unit that's focused on housing accountability, so that we are holding accountable cities and counties, these planning commissions, to actually meet their housing element goals, to actually reach those RHNA goals. And the fact that we stretch those RHNA goals to include 2.5 million housing units in the 6th cycle to be completed in the next 8 years is unprecedented in the state's history. The money we put up, $10.3 billion last year on housing. $10.3 billion on housing. When we got here, there was a big tax credit program of $64, maybe $84 million. We've annualized it at $500 million. We took an infill grant that was less than $50 million a year. That's being annualized at $500 million. We're looking at all our state excess land and putting money up now to develop the excess lands. We work with the legislature to move legislation, substantive legislation on ADUs after years and years and years of debate and people complaining about it. Made progress on that. We dealt with very controversial topics, not least of us SB 9 and duplexes. A lot of folks happy about it, some of you not so happy about it. But we made progress on that. People were talking about that up here for decades. There's a housing agenda for the first time in decades in California. The old housing agenda, I guess, was getting rid of redevelopment and everybody pointing fingers. Real progress now. But it's a flywheel. It takes time. We need to keep leaning in. The Housing Accelerator Program, 1.75 million. Home ownership programs that you helped fund and design. 7,600 families benefiting just last year with $139 million of grants as it relates to down payment and closing costs. Another $100 million we put up to grow that program, and more we'll be announcing in just a few weeks in our May revise. We are moving in the right direction in a way we haven't done in the past. And if you think all that's gobbledygook, ask Huntington Beach. We sued them. And trust me, if you want to get on a recall petition, sue one of your own cities. We did it because they weren't even planning, let alone zoning, on housing. 46 other cities we put under notice. 2/3 of them now are back in compliance. Carrots and sticks, strategies and plans. money, investing time and energy, hard work, working in collaboration with the legislature that gets it, and now we're getting things done. We're starting to wake up. But there's no other issue that's more important in the state of California. How can it be? You saw the Kiplingers. I'm sure you all jumped around and passed around, finding out that actually to live in Texas as a middle-class family, their taxes are 3.8% higher than California. Don't tell Greg Abbott that. Interesting fact. Not for all you high one percenters, I get that. But for middle-class families. So why are so many people leaving? Cost of living. Again, it's the original sin. It connects the dot on more issues than any other issue. It is the issue this state has to confront. And I want you to know we're being muscular about it. We're not walking around the edges. And we'll continue to lean in. We've got more work to do on CEQA. We have more work to do to continue to advance the promise, privileges that come with homeownership. We have more work to do to address housing at all income levels, not just low-income housing, but workforce housing, middle-income housing, those working 150 to 180 AMI. All of that work we still have in front of us. We have a responsibility to do more and better, but I'll close on this. None more pressing than the issue of what is, as I suggested, happening on the streets and sidewalks. It is a disgrace. It's a disgrace. The immorality of it. How can we be this $3.36 trillion economy, the fifth largest economy on planet Earth, running $70 to $80 billion operating surpluses, and have 150, 160, 170, you pick the number, 1,000 people struggling out on the streets and sidewalks, many self-medicating with drug or alcohol addictions, with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, paranoia, people that were stepping over in the streets and sidewalks, and some argue that's compassion. It's a disgrace. The question is, what the hell to do about it? I want to remind you, and I'll close on this. 3 years ago, when I stood in front of you, there was no homeless plan in the state of California. In fact, the state of California didn't hold themselves to account on this. It was the responsibility of cities and counties, and I know this as a former mayor. I worked with 2 governors, never once did the issue of homelessness come up. In fact, I didn't even know I can ask because I assumed Sacramento wasn't in that business. It was the responsibility of cities and counties, and you know what? It looked like it. In fact, under Schwarzenegger, we hit a peak number of people on the streets. The highest number ever recorded was 173,000 folks. It was 161,000 last year. We'll wait for the new numbers. I think we'll break that record. So this is, by the way, not unique. This has been happening now for decades. We've come to almost accept it. What is unique now is what's happened in the last 2 years because of CDC guidelines. Cities and counties pulled away from addressing what was happening in encampments and tents. And that started to stack up, and that acuity is at a breaking point. You've had it. People have had it. Can't take it. So in the last couple years, we've taken responsibility. Not abdicating responsibility, it still needs to be maintained at the local level because any state vision has to be realized at the local level. But we came in, and I give a lot of credit, I see Bob Hertzberg here and others, they worked with Governor Brown near the end of his term to demand he put $500 million up to address this issue. But there wasn't a plan attached to it. There wasn't a strategy attached to it, but it was the first acknowledgement that the state needed to step up. When we got in, we've now taken it to a whole nother level. Last year's budget on homelessness went from $500 million to $12 billion last year. Targeted investments. Now, a lot of you are shaking your head saying, what a waste. You haven't done a damn thing. Well, you know what? We got PolitiFact on this. I was so happy we did. 58,000 people, the state of California, was able to partner and get off the streets last year under 2 novel programs called Room Key and Home Key. We were able to bring 6,000 permanent housing units online in 5.5 months. That's the first time the state has ever done anything like that. 58, can you imagine what it would look like? We'd get 58,000 people off the streets in the last 2 years. We're just building on this. These dollars are just starting to be programmed. But here's the big idea, final words. For the first time ever, the cities and counties, they don't get any money unless they submit a plan to the state with 6 specific measurements and goals. CACs, counties, and cities, and we will compare and contrast the plans. They come in the next 60 days. I am so excited. And we will fund success. We will not fund failure. If we're gonna have a housing accountability unit, it's time for accountability at the local level on the issue of homelessness. Here's what's interesting though. We included, and I appreciate one of you supports that. We included something that got lost, but I believe in. I believe in carrots and sticks. I think you wanna move the mouse, you gotta move the cheese. And the cheese in this case is money. We actually have bonus provisions, specifically set aside money, 18% bonuses for those cities and counties that actually produce results. We will only fund success. And we're doing exactly what we are doing now with housing. We're putting up a scorecard on how municipalities are doing to hold up the mirror of accountability and responsibility. This is a game changer. So I say all this to make this point, not to impress any of you because you're not impressed about what's happening on the streets and sidewalks, but to impress upon you that it's a new day, that there's new intentionality, there's new strategies, there's new energy, there's new focus, new accountability, and that, I think, is going to produce new results. But not unless, and here's my ask of you, not unless we address the issue of chronic mental illness. I've got some of the most successful and fancy people in the United States all assembled in one damn room here in Sacramento that have the ability to go down the street and work the halls in Sacramento. And we need you. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to right the wrongs of the past. And I'm not going to litigate the past because I see a lot of nuance. This is not just about what Ronald Reagan did in his '67 budget or what the Supreme Court did in that 1975 Donaldson decision on civil liberties. This is a series of policies going back decades that created the conditions that exist and persist all across this country, but most acutely here in California. We estimate 30,000 chronic, severely mentally ill people out on the streets and sidewalks in this state. That's a big number. We have been debating old laws like Lanham Petrus Short, were laws that were conceived, conservatorship laws, in the 60s in a world that no longer exists. And we sit there every year hitting our heads against the wall, talking about reforming the laws of the 60s and 70s. My mom used to say this. She said, if you don't like the answer, which often I did, take out the garbage, walk the dogs, she said, ask a better question. We were asking the wrong question. How do we reform LPS? How do we reform Laura's law? And we were playing small ball on the margin. This year we asked a completely different question. If we were going to reimagine a system today, how would we design it? And how would we conduct ourselves in an appropriate, thoughtful, judicious manner that's consistent with the values we hold dear? What's the California way in terms of approaching this issue and acknowledging it is not working? Status quo is unacceptable. And we came up with Care Court. We need your support to get Care Court through this legislature on my desk by July to get this passed and to make a profound impact on this issue. This is a big idea. If we miss this opportunity, it will set us back for years. Forget all the demagoguery. You all people running for office talking a good game about how they're going to reform conservatorships. Well, they've been talking a good game for half a century and nothing has gotten done. We have a chance to actually move the needle with Care Court and get something done at scale. We need your help. We need your support. People are dying on the streets and sidewalks. People are suffering, and people have had it as taxpayers in this state. We have an opportunity to send a message that we are capable, we are compassionate, and we are resolved to address this issue because for the first time ever, we are accountable. All of us are accountable. Society becomes how we behave. We are our behaviors. The world we live in happened on our watch, your watch, my watch. We could do better. And so, to the California Realtors, I just want to thank you for all that you've done to keep this economy moving, all you did during the depths of this pandemic to not dial it in, to continue to work, to continue to grow this economy. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your faith and devotion, not only to yourselves, your families, but for keeping this economy humming, for creating opportunity, for creating not just jobs, but for creating these record surpluses that we're enjoying in the state. That didn't happen because of what we did here in Sacramento. That happens because of what you do every single day. And all I ask for you is we've got a little bit more work to do. And if we can work together to get this care court done, if we can work together to start focusing on what's right with California, not just on what's wrong, then I think we can live up to the aspirations that many of you have, that John now is experiencing as a new resident in our state. And we can disabuse folks that California's best days are behind us. Thank you all very, very much, and thank you for the privilege.